When I talk about CEO Kim Ki-hyun, I feel a bit inferior, you know? And the peak is only this much. In other words, it couldn't rebound from last year's decline.
Isn't it too similar?
Isn't it too similar?
Looking at this, now is the second best opportunity to sell apartments in Seoul.
It's the second, that's right. Hello, this is Kim Ki-hyun from Richgo. Today we have Mr. Elian with us to share some good insights. He is not actually a real estate investor, he is just a researcher, so it's more of a research concept. I don't buy and sell or hold properties for days, so in a way, I can be more objective, since I'm not involved. However, since I was someone who worked full-time in stocks, I applied that experience to real estate, and it has worked out very well.
Stock market.
So, one of the bases for my judgment of the trend is the 36-month moving average. It's the 3-year 2-line. I wrote about it in my book, and now, after 4 months, it has just reached that point. So, I want to share that with you. In chapter 16, there's a section titled Again 2009, which refers to the 3-year 2-line and divergence from 15 years ago. What this means is that the relationship of the 3-year 2-line that appeared in 2009 will also appear this time. Of course, it hasn't appeared yet in July. It needs to rise further to appear. If you look at the content, this is the real index of Seoul apartments, adjusted for inflation. The pink line here is the 36-month 2-line. Could you show the chart? A bit larger, I can see it in the back. But the claim I made was that this is the 36-month moving average of the chemical sector and stocks. If you look here, it shows good resistance and support. Like this, it keeps resisting here. In this state, what happens is that it has now broken through this level.
It has crashed.
It has crashed. The chemical sector is like a leading indicator for the KOSPI. However, the 36-month moving average theory here is something I created. In the securities market, this phenomenon occurs because in the past, our country's funds mainly had a 3-year maturity. Do you remember Hong Kong ELS incident at the beginning of the year? The peak of Hong Kong's ELS was at the beginning of 2021. It rose above in February and continued until May, then kept declining. And that marks a 3-year point at the beginning of this year. That's the same concept as the 3-year moving average. This is because ELS also has a 3-year maturity. Most funds have a maturity of 3 years. There are also 2-year and 1-year options, but every 3 years, some inflection point, whether a peak or a trough, appears. This should be seen as manipulation by hedge funds or asset management companies. For example, if there is a 50% profit, then they can bundle it with other funds to drastically reduce the return rate. In other words, they are saying they won't give the 50%. They tell fund subscribers to just take 30% and be done with it. They distribute 20% to other funds. There are many such instances. So, there are many cases of either hitting rock bottom or skyrocketing every 3 years, and the 36-month moving average for Seoul apartments aligns very accurately. I find this fascinating. This is a 4-year graph of Seoul apartments among the L charts. I'm looking at this, and I've removed everything else so you can see the candlestick chart, returns, and trading volume. If you look here, October 2021 is the peak. The monthly average peak is in November. Right now, October is the peak, but the monthly average shows that November is the high point, and we won't know for sure until the end of December. It could turn negative. It seemed to have turned slightly negative at that time. In other words, this is 3 years. It is definitely 3 years. I feel a bit of inferiority when I only talk about Representative Kim Ki-hyun. No? 3 years ago, we appeared on a certain broadcasting station, and the bearish advocates made their claims right. I was the first to come out and claim the decline rate, but I said it would be as early as April and at the latest June, but in reality it was in October.
Then it has continued to rise.
However, I remember the person who accurately predicted it would be in October. Since it happens once in 10 years, I do feel a bit of inferiority, thinking I should have predicted that. However, considering the actual index price, for example, if I bought something for 1 billion won 3 years ago and it's worth 1 billion won, now is that breaking even? No, that's not right, because you would have paid interest over the 3 years, and there are also transaction costs.
Why?
Considering the price index means taking into account interest rates, holding costs, transaction costs, and all of that reflects the price index. If we reflect this in the price index, it would be much lower than this. Especially when considering the price index, the low point at the beginning of this year is lower than last year's low point. It's this low, because although it has risen over the year, when considering the inflation over the year, it means excluding the price increase. This is how it turned out, and peak is only this much. In other words, it hasn't rebounded from last year's decline. The increase over the past year still hasn't surpassed the decline from the previous year. At this time, the increase this year is definitely much higher than last year's decline, but when considering inflation over the past 2 years, this is what it means. However, the important thing here is this line is the 36-month moving average. It touches exactly here. Then there are 2 years, 1 year, 5 years, and many more. So I will use past data as a metaphor. This R here means real. It refers to the actual index of Seoul apartments, starting from the IMF period. If you look from the IMF period, this 36-month line turns like this, and then we entered a bull market, right? Since this is an early phase, we didn't know at the time whether it was a bull market or not. It rose while turning around, and this increased for 8 years until the bubble 7 burst during President Roh Moo-hyun's term. If you look at it this time as well, then this acts as a resistance line. At this time, after the Lehman setting, it fell and then rebounded, but it faces resistance.
I am experiencing resistance and falling again.
As a result, there was a continuous sharp decline for 3 years. However, there was a rebound at that time, and while Gangnam's 3 districts rose further, Nodogang did not rise. So it almost waited sideways for about 2 years, but then it broke through. Then it turns around. As a result, it rises sharply and continues to go up more and more.
This is a major rise.
However, this was broken in 2022. After falling and slightly breaking the low, nominally it is high, but in reality, it is low. But it went up. And when I was writing the book, it was in July. But now it has just touched. This is what I just saw. It's chilling. It's so similar, isn't it?
Isn't it so similar right now? Is the second best opportunity to sell apartments in Seoul?
Nominally, there are many that have surpassed this peak, especially high-end apartments. Of course, there is still this in Nodogang, but if you look at this as a quarterly chart, an interesting phenomenon occurs. This is the quarterly chart. It's a quarterly chart, so look, the 10 in 2006 means the fourth quarter, the last month of the fourth quarter, December 2006. This is December 2021. That's right, it's the end of the year, then it fell, and it has been falling for almost 2 years, with March being the bottom. It means the first quarter is the bottom. This year, March is also the bottom. In other words, the period from here to here that fell is the same as the period from here to here that fell. Then, 2 collapses rise from here. Right now, 2 collapses are rising, and we don't know about this collapse yet. However, at that time, it also rose but faced resistance and was shattered for 3 years. I believe this phenomenon could appear next year. It's frightening.
No, I also see various data and think that next year could be very risky. I'm thinking this way now, and our Alan, when I was younger, I studied stock charts a lot. But looking at this, it's a complete déjà vu. It's the same. Yes, the completely falling apartments rise again, and as they fall, the 3-year moving average bends down. At that exact moment of hitting it, a second peak is reached, and then it completely crashes.
That's right. In nominal terms, areas like Gangnam or Seoul have surpassed their previous peaks. They have exceeded them this time as well. However, in real terms, there are no districts that have surpassed their previous peaks. In real terms, yes. Although it is said that Gangnam district has exceeded it, in reality, it has not. Since prices have also risen, however, an interesting phenomenon is that when viewed on an annual basis, it looks different. This is the annual chart. You can't see it now because it's covered, but this is the 3-year moving average we just looked at. This is the current 3-year mark. It's rising and hitting a peak. It peaked here. Look, it dropped for 2 years, rose for 1 year, and then dropped for 3 years. It should drop for 2 years, rise for 1 year, and then drop for 3 years. However, during these 3 years, it's not just that it has dropped from a peak for 3 years. It has already taken damage once, rebounded, and then dropped again. Therefore, areas like Nowon and others are in a more serious situation. Seoul and Gangnam have surpassed their previous peaks, but have since fallen. So there is a concept of safety margins. However, most apartments in Seoul cannot escape this phenomenon.
It really seems like the downward wave is starting.
When viewed monthly, it looks like this in detail, but when looking at quarterly candles, the number of quarterly candles is the same as the monthly count. I think this resistance can hold for a month or two, but ultimately, I believe it will drop like this. So, what I wrote in the book 15 years ago, this is not from 15 years ago. If you add 15 years to 2006, it becomes 2021. Every 15 years, a turning point has occurred in our country. 15 years ago, although there is no 3-year moving average here, there are also divergences appearing. I can't explain that here today, but the divergence indicator shows that Gangnam and Seoul are breaking through the base, yet the indicators keep showing negative results. That's what is called divergence, but today, I analyzed it using only the 3-year moving average, approaching it technically like stocks, or Hong Kong ELS.
I mean, just looking at this, How can it fit so perfectly? I find it really fascinating because it's different from the analysis methods I usually use, but the conclusions are almost identical. However, looking at this chart, many people who invest in stocks would know that usually, whether in stocks or real estate, there's always a dead cat bounce when a major decline occurs. After a drop, there's the first decline followed by a dead cat bounce, and that decline is significant in stocks, and the same goes for real estate. So hearing this, it feels a bit eerie.
Since the content is all in my book, I would appreciate it if you could buy the book as well.
Please buy a lot of our Ellie's books. She is truly amazing and incredible. Because I haven't worked at a securities firm for very long, seeing her analyze real estate using charts to extract such insights is really impressive, and she is incredibly talented. Please purchase a lot of our Elian's books, and also sign up for the lecture on December 20th. Additionally, Elian has a YouTube channel, right?
Since the main broadcasts are primarily about stocks, I occasionally do broadcasts about real estate, so please come and watch.
I think today's content was really good. We will have Elian again soon to hear the next story.
Thank you.